So the photos show a My City bus, and down below that there's a person in a wheelchair, a colleague of ours, Anthony, in Cape Town. In the My City bus, you can see the doors open, there's ramps that enable him to get inside. There's also, on the top right, a picture of a disabled parking space with the wheelchair access logo on the ground. So you'll see by my grey hair, I'm an older statesman. I remember in the 80s and 90s when these things started, and it was encouraging to see that they're becoming more and more the norm. There's still a way to go about how they're used, but you'll generally see disabled parking spaces wherever you go around city areas. Okay. And then in the bottom corner shows a passenger assistance unit helping someone with a wheelchair get into an aeroplane. So the passenger assistance unit, generally called a PAU, is like a truck with an elevator on top. So it'll lift the person once they're boarded the truck to raise them to the height of the plane door. Okay, next please. So also there's been some promising local collaborations, and these reflect some of the exhibits we have outside, which have got some amazing innovations. So on the left is a picture of a kind of a stand-up wheelchair with two small wheels in a frame. It's called a rural transporter. The picture next to it shows two people in Umshati, KZN, a very hilly area, transporting a gogo in the rural transporter. And one person at the front helps to pull and guide, and the other person at the front keeps it stable. The picture below shows that the rural transporter can be folded, it's foldable, and attached onto the back of a taxi. So these kind of things are encouraging because it's got community buy-in. We've worked with the community to develop that. It's also the porters, the person at the front and the back, who help to take people to the clinic or to school or to church, etc. They get paid for their service. So it started an income generating scheme. So it's a win-win within the community as it's providing income as well. Okay. On the top right is a wheelchair inside a vehicle with space that's made accessible space. And below that shows a vehicle as well, like a taxi with a row of seats, that some have been moved slightly and it's been adapted to allow space, only at the cost of like 1 or 2 seats, to allow a wheelchair user to use the taxi. So these projects are invaluable to the future development, and we need collaboration. They also need ongoing investment, and that's a key thing to introduce, to maintain that. We're aware of having everyone on board, particularly communities. We're also aware people with disabilities aren't the only person who require universal access. It relates to, as was mentioned before, women who are pregnant, women in general, and extending to other groups like parents with children, and even scholars with bikes and cyclists in general. So we want everybody on board to obtain that. It's not just meeting the needs of one group, it's meeting the needs of everyone. Okay, next please. And the importance is of being at the design stage. So in that sense, far too little progress has happened to date. So the photos here on the left, there's a man in a wheelchair in the middle of traffic. It's a busy route. He's managed to get the road. He's stuck between traffic. He has not got able to access to a vehicle himself. Okay. At the bottom corner is altercation. There's a woman in a wheelchair with her assistant behind her, and she's asked the taxi guy to get onto the taxi, or minibus should I say, and she's been refused entrance. They won't move a seat for her or let her in. Okay. Or the general thing is that if you want to take with your wheelchair, you must pay double price to get and pay extra price for your wheelchair. The top corner is actually myself a number of years ago, where there was no passenger assistance unit available in Cape Town Airport when I arrived back from a conference. So I had to be carried off the plane, literally on a metal flight of steps on the cold, wet, rainy Cape Town. It was a very scary experience. I was younger then. I wouldn't do that again today. And I'd like to think things have improved. Unfortunately, when I arrived to Joburg yesterday for this conference, we landed at 14:25, and then I had to wait an hour and a half to receive my wheelchair from the PAU. Somehow it got lost, and it was found in lost property at the airport. So it was 3 hours before I got back into my wheelchair, and the hotel was very late. So not the best way to start a conference, but very topical to start a conference on accessible transport. Okay. Next, please. The thing is that I'm here, and that's the important thing. Okay. As was mentioned by the Honourable Minister, it's that transport is an enabler. Okay. It is an enabler. And when we take that enabler away, we are denying our youth and people with disabilities across the nation a chance to access all those key areas of education, skill development, human rights, access to services, empowerment, and livelihood. So on the top corner here, there's a photograph of a child in a wheelchair on a long, dusty road trying to get to school. Okay, it's not easy. And the bottom photograph shows a colleague of ours who stays in near Khayelitsha in Cape Town, township in Cape Town. Who you see there, very struggles. He's in between shacks in a very dusty environment, and his brother has to assist him with his daily needs, how to get to the toilet, how to do everything. So we have that situation where, all too common scenario, people with disabilities are stuck at home. They cannot access basic services or the empowerment in that sense, and experience a loss of dignity. Okay. Thanks very much. I'll pass on now to Shakila. Has a microphone.
Thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, what we'll do, we'll take the next three speakers one after the other without me coming here. And then we'll then have a question and answer small session, a brief session, before we then adjourn and go to commissions, if that is in order. And please, you are allowed to clap hands if there's a point that interests you, or if there's a point that you really want it emphasized. I'll come back at the end. Thank you very much. Okay, the speakers are again in this order. My apologies. We are going to have next Shakila Maharaj, and then we'll be followed by Alex Nkosazana, and then Ari Celis. If that order is the one that I'm given, that's fine. If not, in the order that you prefer. Just a round of applause for me to sit down, and then I'll come later. Thank you.
Should I begin? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity, and warm greetings to everybody present. So I'm Shakila Maharaj, and I'm here in the capacity of a member of the Presidential Working Group. I'm a professional, in my profession, I'm an organizational psychologist, and I currently run an audio description company, and we have a mobile app called Describe@. So I'm totally blind. The Presidential Working Group, our role in terms of our presence here was to look at the Universal Access Design Action Plan that's been developed by the Department of Transport and comment on it. And part of each of our talk here or addressing you is including this comment, and that comment is meant to be then taken away by the rest of the delegation and workshopped in the breakaway sessions, and hopefully contributes to the resolutions that come forward. So that's primarily why we've been asked to speak here, the four of us. In looking at the Department of Transport's action plan, basically it comes across as extensive, but that's not necessarily comprehensive. And by extensive, I mean it encapsulates the global standard practices that you would associate with accessibility in transportation. Again, commonly it focuses on the disabilities we typically know. There are disabilities that are least or minimally catered for, but then too, we come up with solutions that are minimum in terms of what they achieve. But this is not unique to us in South Africa, not unique to what our transport department has generated in collaboration with various stakeholder groups. in my experience, it's the trend globally. Whether you are looking at the access, an action plan developed for accessibility within any sphere in society, be it transportation, education, you find the typical trend in developing countries, in developed countries, is to focus minimally on certain disabilities. And consequently, you get a minimum solution. I'm going to address what I mean by that, and I'm going to look at the disabilities that I talk about being minimally introduced or included. That includes myself, the kind of disability I represent, and that's blindness. And we're going to look at some of the invisible disabilities, where you have your neurodivergent, psychosocial, psychiatric, intellectual, and various other types of cognitive and mental conditions. I'm first going to switch over then to Nkosazana and ask him to read something that came through, comments that came through from SA Autism South Africa. Lisa Aziz, representing Autism South Africa, has submitted some valuable points that we felt necessary to include. And I'm going to ask Mtoko to read it as is. Mtoko?
I wish I had more time, but here are my thoughts for the inclusion of persons with hidden disabilities in accessible design for transport. In recent years, the focus has been on the needs of transport users with physical disabilities. All policy documentation has largely focused on the needs of those with physical disabilities, and improvements have been made to transport infrastructure, i.e. ramps, lifts, and the provision of wheelchairs at airports, etc. There is still much to be done in terms of infrastructure improvements for persons with physical disability. The needs of those with hidden disabilities, such as those with, such as those with autism, intellectual disabilities, psychosocial disabilities, anxiety, ADHD, obsessive-compulsive disorders, have largely been ignored. I provide for you two real-life scenarios. A single mother has been struggling for her autistic son to access the school bus. Because of his autism, he gets extremely anxious about unexpected changes. He has sensory sensitivities. He can be oversensitive to sound, smell, lights, taste, touch, and he needs extra time to process information, and he can have high levels of anxiety in social situations. Because of an incident in the bus, he became overwhelmed when a fellow learner pushed and shouted at him. He was barred from the bus with the school insisting that his mum accompany him on the bus. His mum is the sole income bearer of the household and cannot do this. This is one of the many situations where the rights of learners with hidden disabilities have been infringed. The second scenario, a 39-year-old autistic adult is struggling to access an assisted flight to Durban to live with his sister after his mum died. Because of his overwhelming anxiety, he is unable to access a flight without guided facilitation. The sister described his condition, and the airline was afraid, stating they don't know how to handle unassisted autistic people. These two scenarios describe the daily existence of persons with hidden disabilities, and both could have been easily resolved had there been policy guidelines in place on how to provide support and accommodations for persons with hidden disabilities. For example, providing clear visual guides and supports, allowing a person to orientate themselves to a new routine, identifying trained personnel that can assist when a person can become overwhelmed, providing a quiet space or respite space, allowing for use of emotional support dogs, staff training to understand autism and intellectual disabilities, etc. Most important is to ask the person with a hidden disability what their support needs are. I highly recommend the creation of policy guidelines for persons with hidden disabilities and the training thereof, and that persons with hidden disabilities should be pivotal in the creation of these policies. From Lisa Aziz.
Thank you, Lisa. I hope you're listening in. And that addresses some of the concerns related to invisible disabilities. In terms of blindness, I think a key starting point is to understand how we function. Many solutions generated to support our accessibility is not well thought out. And it's reduced simply to either we need braille or voice prompts, alternate reading formats, for example, are adequate. They're not. And they don't support us in integrating fully and also accessing all transportation. So how do we function then as blind persons? Do we really understand that? So how do we function? We function on the basis of certain fundamental capabilities. One is we don't see. That's what we think we don't see. But we actually do see the contradiction. We see. We see like everybody else, but we see through words. We see through visualization using our imagination. If that's understood, visual information throughout the transportation systems would be conveyed to us in a manner that we can then grasp. We do cognitive mapping. What do I mean by that? We need to understand the full scenario in order to grasp what the full picture is, and then we retain that picture. We then respond to that cognitive map. How do you then give this cognitive map to us? You induct us, you orientate us to a situation. How to take a bus, where the bus goes, how to board the flight. From the moment we leave home to our destination and back, the entire journey requires for us to handle it independently and safely, but how can we do that if all of that is then denied to us in terms of adequate accessibility? I want to go back and say that I don't think it's just purely a solution that can be generated by the service providers out there. I think we as persons who are blind are equally responsible for the partial solutions that are generated. One key principle that has brought this about is our dependence on sighted guiding. I'm just as guilty of that. Blind persons have abdicated their independence to sighted guides. It's very easy to do that. As long as we rely on sighted guides to walk us on curbs and pavements, drive us to our destinations, escort us on buses, cars, and planes, we'll never know how to navigate those environments independently. Designers of those services will never know fully what our needs are in terms of supporting our independent navigation. And so that story continues. For us to be able to navigate independently, you need to understand then how we function. And we ourselves need to break away from this dependency we've created on sighted support. How then do we expect to be independent as blind persons if we then work in conflict with what we want when we then go and rely on sighted help? So I want to give you some key examples of pockets of excellence that I've experienced over time, where I believe we can become liberated and independent as visually impaired persons and navigate this world ourselves. And in so doing, understand what this world is all about. So let me give you little examples. New York. I was a student in New York at Columbia University. I realized very quickly when I stayed in Manhattan that if I asked for sighted help, I was judged as that there was something wrong with me. So I had to very quickly learn how the city was structured. The most accessible design to me was that city. It was a grid pattern. It followed compass directions. Avenues ran from north to south. Streets ran from east to west. Even the numbering was consistent. When I figured that out, I realized very quickly I could step out with a sense of security and safety, knowing that I could get to my destination. Now, if cities are designed carefully with that kind of vision that supports independence for blind persons, we will very quickly be able to navigate freely. We will know then what's there, what's on those pavements, what buildings we pass, etc. I want to quickly tell you then another amazing example. In Japan, when I was in Tokyo, are you all with me? Okay, because I don't have pictures, and I hope you're visualizing yourself, all right? So, when I was in Tokyo, my tour guide was a blind person, a fellow colleague who was totally blind, living in Tokyo. I was mesmerized by what this person could do in terms of independent navigation. So when we left the hotel, he showed me that there was a Braille trail. I stepped on it and followed him and walked. It took us to the subway station, to the escalators, which he showed me how to hold and go down. We walked on the platform, and the platform felt like a corridor. It was completely walled. I couldn't fall off the edge onto the track. I stood on a certain tactile spot, and when the subway came along, the doors opened at exactly the same spot, and it was flush to the platform. It felt like I just stepped into another corridor. That design was incredible. It was liberating. We got around that entire area in that city, totally independently, blind leading the blind, and fully having a visionary experience. I'll tell you another thing. I spoke about reliance on sighted guide. There is a place for sighted guiding, not to take away our freedom of movement and not to take away our understanding of the visual world, but to facilitate and liberate us. I went to a conference in Florida, ACB. I was the guest speaker and doing their keynote address. That's the American Council for the Blind. There were several thousand of us blind persons living in an enormous hotel that was about 25 stories high. It was like living on a planet with blind people. What amazed me was that when I had to exit my room to find my way through that hotel, whether it was to entertainment facilities or to the conference venues, I had to do it myself. I was terrified at first and thought, oh dear God, I'm going to be sitting for the rest of the 12 days that I'm here in my room and not getting anywhere. I had to pluck up the courage and step out of that room. But what I realized very quickly is once I understood the layout of the corridors, I would hear these voices, not AI, not automated voice prompts. What that hotel did is they deployed marshals along every corridor. As you approached an elevator, as you stepped out of it, as you walked along corridors, these sighted persons were not there to take you by the arm and then make you dependent as you relied on them to guide you. Instead, they marshaled and told you where to move on to. Within a short time, I was navigating an entire building, getting to where I wanted to go, making my own choices independently, and accessing all the services. So we can use sighted guiding very intelligently to support our independence, not take it away. And I've got numerous examples. So I've got numerous examples like that. Another more recent one is replicas, and I saw something like that today when I was going around looking at the innovators that are here. So when I talk of replicas, so in transportation, if I want to know the layout of the airport, if I want to know the layout of a station, I don't. All I know is I can hold an arm and get there. I can request meet and assist, and from the time I check in, I just move along and hear sounds all the way. I haven't a clue what the corridors look like, what the security checkpoints look like. I eventually end up sitting on a seat on a flight. But when I came across the concept of replicas, which is simply your scaled-down model, when you feel an entire model, you have a total picture. If not, a visually impaired person is always faced with eating an elephant one piece at a time. We understand the world in piecemeal, and we react to it in piecemeal. But when you have a total impression given to you like that, you have that total cognitive map. You can relate to it, now you can learn to navigate it. And this is what I experienced in Delhi, but it's now, it's been designed specifically around tourism destinations. We can take the same concept and apply it to all your different transportation systems. I think going back now to the principles of how we function and the kinds of pockets of excellence and examples that I've related to, if we take those simple things and we integrate them, we can come up with total solutions that can support our total independence so that we can navigate and understand our world independently. So in conclusion, really, what I want to say is, oh yeah, one more thing. Smart technologies. They've come a long way. It's really, really opened our world. We've got all types of incredible apps that can describe to us, that can enable us to do shopping, participate in meetings. And all of that is incredible. But I do want to say one thing. While the techno giants are understanding end-user experience and designing increasingly the apps, the software to meet our needs, there is an area that we've got to be cautious of, and I experienced this in Norway. The more technologies support us in doing things online, and the more online freedom we get, the less freedom we have is to use the transportation systems and access our world, and the freedom to navigate the physical world independently is taken away. Look around you. How many blind persons do you see? Are we visible? No, because as we become more independent online, the need to be visible physically in the open world is less. So there's a fine balance that has to be managed there. Now, I know I'm gone way beyond the 10 minutes, but DDG, where am I? I'm going to continue and I'm going to wrap up. 1 minute. Okay, that's great. So I want to conclude in saying that when we go away to our breakaway sessions, there's a lot of things we need to understand about the user groups that come from the disability sector and how they access our transport systems and what accessibility really means. I also want to say that we may think taking away barriers is removing and facilitating freedom of movement. But one key contradiction lies there. When it comes to blind persons, barriers become facilitators in terms of navigating your world. And how we define barriers becomes very key. Because the obstacle we touch becomes the landmark we know. And so the concepts like that continue. Let me end off. To implement the action plan, to grow it further with what we're learning today, means that there's got to be some kind of resource to make it happen. We can design Rolls-Royce documentation, but we can end up with, like, I better not use that term, but we can end up using maybe a wheelbarrow approach. But what I'm saying is that we need the financial resources in order to achieve the disability agenda. We as the Presidential Working Group took the numerous priorities that we came up with, key to all aspects of life that support us, and we reduced it to two key things in our last engagement with government, with our state president. One is to resource the disability agenda and create a disability development agency. Similarly, we also brought up the fact that we need a Disability Act. Without those two key priorities being addressed and achieved, we're not going to go far. Because eventually government cannot be held accountable. Everything they do would be a nice to have, and it'll be achieved when they can do it. But if we've got that Disability Act, we can get to the stage of litigating, holding government accountable, enforcing. All those countries that are achieving, all those countries where disabled people are achieving their aspirations largely arises out of their Disability Act. So we got to ensure that every one of us that leaves this room understands those two key priorities: funding the disability agenda and having a Disability Act that facilitates all the integration of disability rights laws within every ministry. So I want to stop there, and I want to thank you for the opportunity. And I do believe the future is hopeful. I do believe it's all about creativity and innovation that's eventually showing that we have unlimited possibilities to become as independent as our mainstream society. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Am I audible enough? Morning, all. Thank you, Program Director. Thank you to my colleagues from the Presidential Working Group on Disability. My name is Alex Msichana. In my everyday life, I'm an entrepreneur with a disability where I own a company that is working very hard, our mission being to get deaf people into the economy. We're trying to strive for economic inclusion for deaf people and ensuring that they get employment and also get assisted to start their own small businesses as well, so that the economy can thrive. So that is what I do on a daily basis. But today I stand before you as a member of the Presidential Working Group on Disability, and I stand here in front of all of you who are driven by a common purpose to advocate for the rights and inclusion of persons with disabilities, particularly in the realm of transport. The theme for this summit today resonates deeply with our collective mission: accessible transport for all. So let me just get my slides going. My colleague, Dr. McKinney, has already highlighted the action plan and priorities that we as the Presidential Working Group set forth for universal access, and I would like to take that further, but focusing specifically as it pertains to how persons with hearing impairment and the deaf community experience transport issues. We are all aware that South Africa boasts a robust legal framework aimed at promoting accessibility and inclusion in various sectors, including transportation. Key legislation such as the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, our PEPUDA, and the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities, all are a legal framework that underscore the government's commitment to upholding the rights and dignity of all citizens, regardless of ability. In the transport sector, we have the National Land Transport Act. The Integrated National Disability Strategy set forth provisions for universal accessibility of transport infrastructure, services, and facilities. These policy and instruments lay the foundation of our collective efforts to ensure equitable access to transport for persons with disabilities, including those with hearing impairments and other invisible disabilities. Legislation, policy, and regulations are crucial pillars supporting universal accessibility. In the context of people with hearing impairments, this entails ensuring that transport regulations accommodate accessible communication methods such as sign language interpreters and visual notifications. Equitable and dignified access to customer service is paramount. Persons with hearing impairment deserve not just access, but also the opportunity to engage and provide feedback. This can be facilitated through accessible communication channels and training for transport personnel in sign language and deaf awareness. Inclusive processes and timely information are vital in order for persons with hearing impairments to navigate the transport system seamlessly. This includes leveraging innovative technology for real-time communication, ensuring equal access to emergency services, and providing comprehensive information on disruptions and events through visual and text-based mediums. When it comes to accessible infrastructure, universal design principles could be embedded in all aspects of transport infrastructure development. For persons with hearing impairments, this translates to ensuring visual cues, tactile guidance, and clear signage to complement auditory information, thereby fostering independent navigation. Additionally, accessibility to diverse modes of transport is essential for inclusivity. For persons with hearing impairments, this means advocating for features such as visual alerts, induction loops, and captioning services to enhance communication and ensure a safe and comfortable journey. While commendable strides have been made in recent years to improve the accessibility of South Africa's transport system, challenges persist, casting shadows on our progress. Success stories are many, from the implementation of accessible buses equipped with induction loops for hearing aid users to integration the real-time text alerts for transport disruptions and public transport services. However, our journey towards full inclusivity is far from over. Gaps remain, and we need to address these and ensure that we have hubs that deal with the absence of captioning services and multimedia communications. Moreover, inadequate awareness among transport personnel regarding the needs of persons with hearing impairments, these pose significant barriers to meaningful access. The images on the screen that you see there behind me, illustrating accessible information on public transport. We see a dynamic screen inside a booth at a train and a bus, commonly known as passenger information display, PIDs. These screens provide crucial real-time updates to passengers, including notifications about approaching stations, ensuring that all travelers, including those with hearing impairments, are informed throughout their journey. Additionally, one image showcases the loop system on the train, also known as the induction loop or hearing loop, which enables individuals with hearing impairments and using aids and cochlear implants to wirelessly receive audio signals directly to their devices, enhancing communication accessibility in public spaces such as trains and buses. These images tell the story of some of the successes we have registered as a country to making transport accessible to persons with hearing impairments, while some depict daily frustrations that are encountered. Colleagues from an association of persons with disabilities in the Western Cape shared with me how experiences on a journey they recently undertook to test Cape Town's new blue electrical multiple unit trains, which are dubbed the People's Trains, revealed both improvements and gaps in the universal design of the trains themselves and the stations through which they traveled. For example, a glass window at the ticket office caused communication difficulties due to reflections that were showing on the glass. Despite the presence of the telecoil at the ticket office, you can see there in the image that the ticket office is well signed with the telecoil sign there. But the staff were unaware of its existence and how to activate it. Visual emergency evacuation signage was also not adequately addressed. The wide corridors between the train coaches, without any separation, require heightened awareness from individuals with hearing impairment. Recent enhancements include auditory announcements, signaling upcoming stations, and auditory cues for door operations, aiding individuals who are blind or visually impaired to navigate their journey. Conversely, LED signs displaying the station's name are prominently visible at both ends of the carriage, benefiting those with hearing impairments. However, it remains unclear if the emergency button near the wheelchair area accommodates individuals with hearing impairments. As a person with a hearing impairment myself, my own personal journey tells a frustrating narrative of encountering barriers at every turn when I travel. Take, for instance, the image depicting an individual standing before a ticket booth at a parking lot. This person is ready to pay for a parking ticket. If the ticket machine malfunctions, it leaves him stranded and reliant on the intercom for assistance. The absence of functional communication channels exacerbates the situation. I remember standing frustrated at the airport trying to log out and get to my car, and I could not even find anybody to assist me. I was supposed to use the intercom, but how do I communicate over the intercom when I'm hearing impaired and I cannot be able to hear the other person at the other end of the intercom? Safety protocols also on flights, pre-flight and in-flight, lack provisions for individuals with hearing impairment. You are sitting on your flight, about to enjoy your journey, going to Cape Town or overseas, wherever your destination might be. You are unable to hear the safety messages that the lovely stewardesses stand in front there, telling everyone about safety on the plane. When the pilot announces any announcements that are made, you are sitting there wondering, what are they saying? What is happening? No one can explain to you what the pilot is announcing. So we need those measures to be in place so that people with hearing impairments can comfortably enjoy their journeys, knowing that should there be an emergency, they will be able also to hear what the emergency is all about and prepare themselves also to exit or do whatever is required of them to do to circumvent that emergency. So while strides have been made in implementing accessibility measures, gaps persist, hindering the full realization of universal access for all citizens. The Consumer Protection Act of 2008, though comprehensive, has not been fully harnessed to address accessibility issues in the transport sector, leaving a critical void in our pursuit for inclusivity. To address these challenges and pave the way for a more inclusive transportation ecosystem, we as the PWGD humbly submit the following recommendations to the Department of Transport. Implement comprehensive training programs to transport personnel at all levels, focusing on deaf awareness, communication strategies, and the use of assistive technologies. In terms of policy integration, integrate universal design principles and accessibility standards into all transport-related policies, ensuring that the needs of persons with disabilities, including those with hearing impairments, are systematically addressed. In terms of investment in technology, the department must embrace innovative technologies such as mobile applications with built-in sign language interpretation and audio-visual announcements to enhance communication and accessibility for all. The president did say that he walked about this morning and he saw a lot of innovation outside. So the solutions are there. Persons with disabilities have come up with various solutions because we know the challenges and we know what needs to be put in place in order to help us navigate our challenges. So use those SMMEs that have developed all these innovative systems. Use those organizations of people with disabilities that have taken the time to come up with solutions. Partner with them. Collaborate and foster partnerships with disability advocacy organizations, deaf associations, academic institutions to co-create solutions and ensure that the voices of persons with hearing impairments are heard and heeded in decision-making processes. Investment in research is also important. Prioritize research and academic inquiry into accessibility issues within the transport sector, filling the knowledge gaps and informing evidence-based policy decisions. In closing, let us heed the call for action outlined in the Integrated National Disability Strategy white paper, which emphasizes the fundamental right to accessible transport for all individuals. By working collaboratively and prioritizing inclusivity in our transport policies and practices, we can break down barriers, empower individuals with disabilities, and create a more inclusive society for all. As we prepare to break into commissions after this plenary, let us reflect on the rich discussions we've had today on the imperative ahead. Our gathering comprises a diverse array of voices, and each perspective brings unique insights and experiences to the table, enriching our collective understanding of the accessibility challenges facing South Africa's transport sector. In guiding our discussions within the commissions, we urge each delegate to embrace the following principles. First, recognize the intersecting nature of accessibility challenges, considering not only physical barriers, but also socio-economic, cultural, institutional factors that impact the lives of persons with disabilities. Let us ensure that our discussions are inclusive and responsive to the diverse needs and experiences within our communities. Realizing that all our discussions will bear minimal impact without the Disability Act in place, let us advocate for the development and implementation of a comprehensive Disability Act in South Africa. Echoing the urgent call by the Presidential Working Group in this matter and the broader disability sector that we need the Disability Act to ensure that policies enacted are enforced, implementation happens, evaluation and monitoring happens, reporting and feedback happens so that we can all enjoy our rights. Such legislation is not just a legal imperative, but a moral obligation, providing a robust framework for protecting the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities across all facets of life, including transportation. We need to foster collaboration and partnerships across all sectors. Finally, let us situate our discussions within the broader global context of disability rights and accessibility, drawing inspiration from international best practice and frameworks that assist to leverage knowledge exchange and collaboration in pursuit of inclusive transport systems. Shakila shared some wonderful examples of what is happening in the international community. I've also had wonderful experiences whenever I travel, where in other Western countries, accessibility is not even an issue. You get to a flight, there's accessibility. You get to the train station, there's accessibility. You get to a hotel, there's accessibility. So let us also do that in South Africa, and let's seize the opportunity to chart a course towards a more inclusive and accessible future for all. I thank you.
I think the next speaker is going to present online. And I said I will come at the end. But as they are connecting, Ari Celis, I just want to make one announcement. There are 2 driver's licenses lost driver's licenses. Now, Asimapodisa, come on. There's police all over around this place. I don't know how you're going to drive, going back home. So the owners can come and see me. The pictures are in grayscale, black and white. So the owners must come here, black and white. And then I'll help them. So I'll identify you through your in-person appearance. Are we ready with Ari?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me clearly?
Very clear, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. President, Minister Dlamini Zuma, Minister Chikunga, other ministers and MECs, MMCs present, and you, sir, the DGG, most importantly, fellow persons with disabilities, and then stakeholders in the transport sector. Pity that the ministers and the president are now not here. Thank you, first of all, to the Department of Transport for this summit, allowing us to engage with you on this matter of transport. A human right so flawed with shortcomings and inaccessibility. Mr. President, your speech was eloquent and you said the right things. You seem well informed, but let me fill you in some gaps and the reality. I serve on the Presidential Working Group on Disability. I serve on the South African Disability Alliance, and I serve on the Quad Para Association of South Africa board. I want to start with a short and articulate summary of the definition of disability. Disability is an experience that arises out of the interaction between a person and the health condition and the context within which they live. It's not our health condition that disables us. It's the environment within which we live that disables us. Can you move the next slide, please? Minister Dlamini Zuma, I met you in 1998 when you were Minister of Health at Hilton College, when you and the late Madiba gave 600 wheelchairs to children to celebrate his birthday. The conundrum is, they are now mobile, but where do they go? And how do they get there? They have mobility aids now. They need the freedom of transport and accessible infrastructure. Let me set the tone and state some